My questions will be for Minister Fraser. I was recently in Ottawa just a few months ago. I met Kevin and his wife, Malaya. Kevin used to be a truck driver at a Nunavut mine, but is now out of a job due to the mine closing. He wanted a better life for his family, so he moved away from the rougher part of town where drugs and alcohol were prevalent. They moved into a small government-funded house with their daughter and 3 young grandsons in 2011. Yet, Kevin and Malaya showed me there is mold in every corner. The bathroom plumbing is backed up and has been broken and has been that way broken for the last few years. He has had to cover every window with plastic to stop the frigid drafts to keep his family warm. And in one case, there's a kitchen window that if he didn't keep it closed, his grandchildren could fall 15 feet down and be severely harmed as a result. The siding is falling off. The floors are falling apart. Malaya has had bad asthma and is often triggered by the ever-present mold. Minister, would you call this a success or a failure?
Anytime you're dealing with living conditions like you've just described, I think it's a signal that greater level of investment needs to follow. Now, to be clear, Mr. Chair, do I have the floor? About the roughly the same amount of time as the questioner?
No. It's whether it was a success or a failure.
Mr. Chair, do I have the floor, and do I have as much time as the questioner?
Allow the minister to answer your question, please.
So I want to be careful when you're dealing with issues that are managed by Indigenous partners or territorial partners without having had the chance to discuss this specific issue with those who manage the program and labeling their work as a failure. And I hope you would not necessarily attribute that to them the way you've put it in your question. But I think anytime you see that quality of housing, it demands greater investment. So we'll continue to increase the resources for our partners who manage these issues, including presumably the project that you're referring to.
Minister, the question was to you. I'm not asking you to answer questions based on the other housing authorities that are in Nunavut. I'm asking because the federal government has a responsibility around housing, and I asked you a simple question whether it was a success or a failure. It clearly is a failure. I'll move on to my second question. Minister, you have been in government for 9 years, almost a decade. Are you familiar with the 2023 Northern Housing Report?
Yes.
Okay. From the report, 80% of families in Nunavut can't afford to buy a house. 51% of families can't even afford to rent a place to live. The average price of a single detached home reached a historical high of $724,504, which was an increase of almost 20% over the previous year. As of April this year, only 55% of residents have a job. Construction is down, residential construction is down, non-residential construction is down. The simple truth is the houses are not getting built, and you know that, Minister. And this is from a minister who's promising 4 million houses across the country. There's a need for at least 3,000 or more houses in Nunavut. It's not getting done. I'll read an article. Actually, Minister, I'll get back to my time is short. Would you call this, Minister, your housing record in Nunavut a success or a failure?
Mr. Speaker, again, just confirming I have time to answer this question given the length of the question that was put to me.
You don't get to decide your
I always
time.
ask myself a motivation behind certain questions. Mr. Chair, do I have the floor? I'm interrupted every time I raise the Conservatives' record on Indigenous housing.
It's not
there's a point of order
your floor.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmer.
There's no, when we come here as opposition to question the minister for, they've been here for 9 years, houses are not getting built. I'm getting to it. And then we're questioned about the time and length of our question. When I'm talking about a story about Kevin and Malaya, people that are actually living in squalor because of this minister's inaction.
Mr. Chair,
if that's taking too much time, I apologize.
I have no problem with the time of the question.
To answer the questions we are asking of him.
I don't believe that's a point of order.
It's not a point of order. I agree with you. Moreover, I have no problem with the length of the question. I actually wish the previous questioner spent as much time on Indigenous housing. What I have problems with is the Conservatives trying to shut down an answer that may be uncomfortable for them. Because what I hear behind that question, coming from a member who opposes the very investments that are designed to address the needs he's raising in his question, when I know that he stands and votes against those measures, I ask myself, is he trying to score a point or to solve a problem? It's clear his interest is to score a political political point, because
Chair,
when the
what are you
Conservatives had an
doing?
opportunity to make investments to build housing in Indigenous communities, they chose not to. When they have an opportunity to vote
back
for
my time.
or against investments to
claiming
build more
back his
housing,
time. He
they
doesn't
vote
want to hear him
against.
talk.
I will take with a grain of salt
Wasting his
the
time.
continued interruptions, because
my
this is
time back?
uncomfortable given the historic record of Conservatives withdrawing
Can I have my time
investments
back? Point of
when it comes
order.
to housing in Indigenous communities. So question away, take as much time as you would
Point
like,
of order.
but let's engage in a real
Hello.
conversation rather than a
Mr.
cheap
Chair.
shot for Facebook.
You know, I've claimed my time back for the last minute because he's just been running off on an answer talking about a previous Conservative government. The questions are to the government that's been in power for 10 years, okay? His responsibility as minister to answer my question. And when you're not recognizing that I'm trying to claim back my time, Mr. Chair, you know, it's our time, it's not the minister's, okay?
Yeah.
I understand that, and you still have a minute and a half.
Okay.
It's not a point of order.
Yeah, it is a point of order. He's claiming back
That's
his
not a point
time.
of order.
So
but-
is it my time?
Yes, continue.
Okay, can I,
We need a card system, I think.
do I have my time?
It's running.
Okay. So, Minister, you haven't answered my question twice now. I've asked whether the previous two examples have been a success or a failure. You deliberately aren't answering that as success or failure. You're saying we're just going to throw more money at it or make bigger promises. Your government can't even plant 2 billion trees, and yet you're going to promise to build 4 million houses? You know, so it's still my question. So from an article from Nunavut, this is around the housing units promised in Tallywhack, including 2 5-plexes, still haven't been built because they're coming in at an extremely high cost of $1.1 million per unit. This is a quote. They were all just way too expensive, Kuzagak said. The Housing Corporation just doesn't have that type of money. This isn't the first time in recent years the Nunavut government has canceled projects due to the rising costs. Guess why? Canada's rising inflation rate, high fuel prices, and supply chain delays have affected construction in the territory. So, Minister, you're going to say it's not my responsibility, not my fault. You've been in government for almost a decade. It's all your fault.
Mr. Chair, I didn't hear a question at the end of that. However, I would point out that we're dealing with...
Has this been a...
Mr. Chair, do I have the floor?
Housing,
It's,
Okay,
Has
order,
housing been
please.
a
Take my
success
direction
or
from
a
you.
Mr.
failure?
Zimmer,
Minister.
there's 10 seconds. Just Mr. Fraser, a short answer, and then we have to move on.
We have built more than 22,000 homes in Indigenous communities through the programs we've introduced since 2015. The Conservative government had a $300 million fund that had 99. I will not take lessons on delivery when it comes to housing in Indigenous communities from someone who votes against every one of the policies it would support when he's clearly motivated by his political interest rather than trying to help vulnerable communities.
This guy's cooked.
Your time
Point
is
of order.
elapsed. Point of order, Mr. Zimmer.
Yeah, the simple question, he asked me a question and I still had 10 seconds left. The question was whether you were a success or a failure. You clearly have been a failure. Thank you.